So it's time, Vince, for us to dive into some talk about the Southern Cal Trojans. I don't want to
There it is.
see. I don't want you getting mad at me. I want to say Southern
Yeah.
Cal. I know you and Sean are adamant about the Southern Cal thing. So
Darn right. Darn
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, we are going to talk about
just keep
Southern
in
Cal.
mind this is a USC preview that's meant for everyone, not just Notre Dame.
This is true.
fans.
No, I know.
No.
No, we're going to talk USC, which, again, we go in order of Notre Dame's opponents, which is kind of just a fun way to go about it. But we are not previewing USC versus Notre Dame. We are previewing USC as USC and what their season could potentially be in all of those different things. And so this is solely a USC preview, but it is Notre Dame's seventh opponent of the season. Southern Cal comes into Notre Dame, Indiana, Notre Dame Stadium, October 18th. It is a night game, 7:30, 7:30 kickoff. But again, this is not Notre Dame versus USC. This is just the USC preview and what that entails. And so let's kick this thing off, guys. This is the last of the home games for Notre Dame in that span. It ends the 3-game homestand for Notre Dame. We talked about this in the last segment at Boise State, NC State, USC. And again, I think that's a really important stretch for Notre Dame. And this is a massive year for USC as well. They've gone 15-11 and 9-9 in conference play, whether they were in the Pac-12 in 23 or the Big Ten in 2024. And then, of course, just to add a little bit of spice to the deal, this is the last scheduled Notre Dame USC game at the moment. And so that adds a little bit of spice to this whole thing. So, who is USC, guys? Who is USC in 2025? That's the biggest question that we've got right now.
When you look through college football, there are teams that enter seasons with a lot of different things to prove. And some teams are looking to get back to the pinnacle. That's like Ohio State, Notre Dame to a degree, Penn State, Boise State to a degree. Some teams that are on the verge but want to take over just get that jump over the hump. That could be Notre Dame. That could be Texas, Oregon, teams like that. And then there's those teams that, coaches fighting for his job. And then there's those teams kind of in the middle. And the teams that are the blue bloods, and I do believe USC to be a blue blood, and that are sort of wandering through the desert and thought they were or had arrived at that oasis, which USC thought they had done when they hired Lincoln Riley, who had taken Oklahoma to, 4 playoff berths in his career at Oklahoma. So, yeah, it'd be 16, 17, 18, and 19, I believe. He had done – 17, 18, 19. So he 16 when he was the offensive coordinator. Took him to 3 playoff berths. Had won the Big 12 4 out of 5 years. And in year 1 at USC, takes over a team that had gone 4-8 the year before, had fired their coach, Clay Helton, replaced him, obviously, with Lincoln Riley, who USC kind of beat out LSU to get Lincoln Riley here. And you go 11-3. You're scoring a ton of points. Your offense is exciting. You win the Heisman Trophy. You're a game away from your first ever playoff berth. You're going in. You've got a rematch against Utah, a team that had beaten you by 1 point at their place in the regular season. You're going into that game. You're 11-1. You win that game. USC's ranked 4th. You win that game. You're in the college football playoffs, and they lost by 23. What's wild, guys, is since that 11-1 start, USC has gone 15-13 since that start. You now go into year 4, and it's kind of like if you're going to turn it around, it's kind of got to start now. The question is going to be, if they turn it around, how much? Is it a game or two improvement, or do they really turn things around and they're the Big Ten team, like they're the Indiana this year? They're that team that kind of comes out of nowhere and like, wow, that team really got it rolling. And how well Lincoln Riley can develop this team this year and get this team ready to play is going to go a long way towards silencing some of the questions about this program. There's some things he's doing that get you some black eyes. USC fans are going to be totally fine if you want to talk about not playing Notre Dame and having a softer schedule if you're dominating. If you're not, it's a bad look. And it's wild how that can be. You could say the same exact thing, but if you're doing it from a place of weakness, it looks soft. If you're doing it from a place of strength, it's like, well, yeah, you're so-and-so. You can do whatever the heck you want to do. And USC's kind of in that crossroads, guys, where in year 4, with all the money that program has, with the opportunity that has, with the talent base that surrounds it, by year 4, you should be rolling. And then to make things worse, your biggest rival has gone 24-5 the last 2 years, has made it to the national championship game, and has now beaten you 4 of the last 5 years. That's what USC is up against right now. And that's what Lincoln Riley is stepping into. And so when you look at this season for USC, it's not just, well, how good are they going to be? I think this is a very important year for USC. They need a turnaround. They need a quick turnaround because USC fans will give you it's actually a fan base that I've always felt gives you grace early. You get about a couple years. And after that, if you don't turn it around, then that's who you are and you're not going to overcome it. I think Pete Carroll go 6-7 in his first year at USC? Let me look that up here real quick. I do believe that Pete Carroll went 6-7 or 7-6 in his first year at USC. He was a guy that not a lot of people wanted. It was the rumors at the time he's 4th or 5th best guy. He went 6-6 in year 1. Goes out in year 2, loses 2 of their first 5 games. They get beat by Kansas State, get beat by Washington State. They're 3-2, and it's like, did they make a mistake? Then USC went on to win their next 8 games, finish 11-2, and the rest is kind of history. Co-champs in 2003, outright champs in 2004, played for the title game in 2005, and like a down year after that was like 10-2. But they gave him a little bit of time. Lincoln Riley's getting a lot more time than Pete Carroll did because Pete Carroll was not a guy that necessarily had Lincoln Riley's track record. But if they don't turn around this year, guys, then USC fans are going to stop caring about the 11-3 in year 1. Your track record plus what you did in year 1 has given you a grace period to go 15-11 and still be able to survive. You match that 7-8 wins again this year. Now all of a sudden the heat turns way up in Southern California. That's what I think is at stake for this team. On top of just you're a blue blood. You're expected to be part of these playoffs, and we're going to find out if he can get him there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, look, Lincoln Riley is in a spot where he's regressed every year that he's been out in LA, and that's not a good spot to be in when you're heading into year 4. Typically, it's the other way around. You know, you look at the more traditional track records of, you know, Marcus Freeman starts out, they're 9-4, but you see the potential, and then they go 10-3, and then you put it all together in year 3, you go 14-2, and you play for a national title. Lincoln Riley, it's been the exact opposite of, you know, you start out hot, you get a Heisman level winning quarterback, and then, you know, you had a former Biletnikoff, you know, winner as your wide receiver 1, and you brought over a lot of guys from Oklahoma, and it was really exciting. They were a game out from playing in the playoffs, and then it's just kind of downhill from there. But even in 23, it was a flawed 6-0, but they started out undefeated. They were in the top 10 when they came to South Bend, and then they got decimated.
Yeah, they got humbled.
And so from that game, it's just been downhill for Lincoln Riley, and he's got to find a way to change it around. And I think, you know, transitioning here to the next part of just why I believe that they've struggled is I don't think that this team has an identity. I don't.
I want to real quick, because you made a point about them starting 6-0 in 2023. Since that 43-41 win over Arizona, which was their 6th win. So going into that game, they were 17-3 under Lincoln Riley. Since then, they've gone 9-11. 9-11. In their last 20 games, USC is 9-11. Like, that is Marcus Freeman is going into his 4th year at Notre Dame. He has 9 losses for his career at Notre Dame. 10 if you want to count the first bowl game. USC's done that in a year and a half under Lincoln Riley. Like, and the reason we're bringing up Notre Dame in this context is because that's your rival. If we were talking about Ohio State, we'd be comparing them to Michigan and vice versa.
Well, and they both started at the exact same time too, right? I mean,
right.
they were, so
Lincoln Riley won that first game,
right? And it's a reasonable comparison,
right? Yeah. Notre Dame went 9-4 in year one under Marcus Freeman. USC went 9-3,
right?
And since then, it's just been completely opposite directions, and that's what you're going to be held up against as your rival. And on top of your history, your track record,
right?
So, but to your point, Trevor, and get back to that, I do think that lack of identity is part of that, because I think Lincoln Riley thought he could bring over the same identity that he did from Oklahoma. What he learned, however, is you didn't build the identity to Oklahoma. Bob Stoops did.
Mm-hmm. He was riding coattails.
Your job was just to don't screw up this.
Right.
This, he gave you a Ferrari and said, "Don't wreck it." At USC, you were given a hoopty, and you're supposed to figure out a way to upgrade to a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I think he thought he could just kind of do what he did at Oklahoma, and he realized, no, this is a much different situation. And I don't know that he knows how to establish identity so far. And if he can't change that, to your point, Trev, that's going to be the thing that could keep him from turning it around. So I want to kick it back to you to continue that. But I do think that's the dichotomy is he tried to do what worked at Oklahoma. The reality is you're not the reason that this worked at Oklahoma. Bob Stoops was in the playoffs before you got there. His first playoff appearance was 15. You didn't get there until 16. So I believe, actually, did I get that? I think he was there for 1 year as the OC, correct? Or did I get that wrong? He was the OC in 15, but he was the OC. And, Bob Stoops has a national title, played in multiple national title games. So I think that's the part that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, overall, you look at this team, and especially after they lost Caleb Williams, but even in 2023 a little bit, I just think that they don't have any sort of identity. I've praised Lincoln Riley on this channel quite a bit about his offensive mind, but I mean, I've kind of broken it down into a couple different things. I don't think they have an identity. Last season, especially, they had way too many moving parts. Look at their wide receiver core. You had 7 guys that all demanded to be wide receiver ones. It's just too much. Way too many mouths to feed. And then they just rely way too much on skilled talent. Way too much. They're willing to – it's similar to what his regime was at Oklahoma. You're willing to give up 24 points a game because you're confident your offense is going to score 40. And he's maintained that mindset last season when you didn't have a Caleb Williams, when you didn't have a Jordan Addison, and that's just not going to get you far, especially when you're in the Big Ten. The only teams that can do it in the Big Ten and kind of not be that great on defense, and even Ohio State was one of, if not the best defensive team in the country last season. You can't be an air raid offense in the Big Ten unless you're Ohio State or Oregon. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of that conference. USC learned that the hard way, but they just don't have a true identity. Is that something you can establish in year 4? I mean, that's
especially with the way they go about putting their roster together.
Yeah,
I am still of the belief, and I've talked about this on other shows, is that I have yet to see a college program be successful on a regular basis building your team through the portal. Like you can have quick success, but then it seems to fall off, or it goes like this. And so it's very difficult if you don't have a very distinct identity for your program. If you're going to go out and you're going to bring in 30 guys or whatever the number is, that's tough. That is tough.
That's why you got to give him credit for bringing in Chad Bowden. Because you look at USC right now, they're going to have a top 5 to 7 recruiting class this year. Right now, it's, I think, ranked 1st or 2nd. That's more of volume. They've got almost 30 guys committed. They've had a couple guys flip. They'll lose a couple kids, add a couple more kids. But I think, to your point, Vince, I think Lincoln Riley realizes I can't just live and die by the portal anymore. And I can't just go out and restock my receiver room, my O-line, my D-line every year with portal guys. It's not going to work. And I do think that he is adjusting, because you can say to a guy, hey, man, what you did was wrong. But the question then becomes, okay, can he get better at it? Can he improve? Can he say, hey, all right, I may have got it wrong, but now I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and we're going to get better at it, and all those type of things. And when you look at what USC is now doing in the 2026 recruiting class, it's a different situation. And so they're out there and they're going and getting high school kids, and they're looking for high school quarterbacks, and they're bringing in a bunch of high school offensive linemen, especially. I think the number is they've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 offensive linemen committed in the 26 class. Oh, that's 2024. Sorry. Let's go to 2026. They've got, all right. So you've got offensive tackle, Keeney Pepe. You've got, let's see here, Sun Tafa is an interior offensive lineman. You've got Cannon Smith as an offensive tackle. Chase Dennis is an offensive tackle. John Fafita is an offensive lineman. You got 5 offensive linemen. Plus, you've got commitments from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defensive linemen. Now, 8 might be a little too much. They're going to lose a couple guys. But you're not bringing in double digits of high school linemen. That's the big thing for USC. You can't, because to the point, Vince, and this is why I say, I don't think the expectation for USC this year to think that Riley's turned the corner is you got to get to the playoff. It'd be nice. I just think you've got to go show legitimate progress, because you tried to go with the quick fix. It didn't work. Now you're trying to build the right way. You can't do that overnight. It's going to take a couple years to get that going. Marcus Freeman, what he did at Notre Dame did not happen overnight. It wasn't really until year 3 of this building the way we want to build, primarily through the high school recruiting, that it went there. And then now what you're doing is, as you're waiting on those young players to develop, you can fill a gap here, fill a gap there, fill a gap over here in the portal. And so it's hard to, and this goes back to your 2 points, guys, to me go together. It's really hard to build an identity when you're remaking your roster every year. When we talk about the top programs, Ohio State this past year, they had some portal guys. The quarterback was a portal guy. Their left tackle, their center, one of their 2 running backs were portal guys. Their stud safety was a portal guy. They had another corner as a portal guy. But those guys walked into a situation where they're predominant, the rest of their roster, all Ohio State born and bred players. Notre Dame, who played USC or Ohio State in the title game last year, their quarterback was a portal guy. One of their starting ends was a portal guy. They had a safety who was a portal guy, a nickel who was a portal guy. 2 of their top 3 receivers from the offseason were portal guys. They went to the portal, but those guys were joining a roster that was predominantly born and bred as college football players in the Notre Dame system. Georgia, very few portal guys, SEC champs. Born and raised Georgia kids, right? And even if you look at Washington 2 years ago under Kalen DeBoer, yeah, they had some portal guys. Jeremy Bernard, they got in from Michigan State, their quarterback, but a lot of their best players, their running back was from Mississippi State, I think. Vast majority of their roster, however, their 2 stud receivers, Rome Odunze, Janet McMillan, homegrown. Roger Rosengarten, offensive lineman, homegrown. You're adding those guys to a culture, and instead of using those guys to build a culture. And when you add 30-some transfers, what culture are they walking into? You've got 30 different personalities from different cultures and different backgrounds, and now you're going to try to, with what leadership are you building that around? And that's the mistake that Lincoln Riley made. He thought it just was putting a collection of talent out there and like it's a dream team and you're going to go win, and it didn't work. And you can't build an identity if you don't have a core to build that around. Marcus Freeman's identity at Notre Dame was not established the minute he walked in there. It took time. Dabo Swinney at Clemson did not win year 1. They almost got rid of him after his first full season because he part-time, he interim year 1 and struggled the next year. It took him several seasons to get that going. Kirby Smart went 8-5 in his first year at Georgia. And second year, Georgia made the title game, and then they were kind of out in the wilderness the next couple of years, couldn't figure out how to beat Bama before they finally figured it out. And so not many people win overnight unless you walk into a Larry Coker type of situation or Lincoln Riley replacing Bob Stoops situation where you inherit Baker Mayfield and that kind of talent. He didn't have that at USC. And so I think big picture, the last 2 years, Lincoln Riley has shown me decisions he's made as a head coach that make me realize he's not just burying his head in the sand and saying, no, we'll start scoring again and give me the right receivers, give me the right quarterback, and we're going to be fine. You don't go hire Dan Tomlin and completely remake your defensive staff the way he did a year ago, and you don't go out and pay Chad Bowden the money you were paying him, it's a big chunk of change, and ask him to just do portal stuff. And you look at what they've done in high school recruiting with the players they've landed. I think he understands, and this is what should give you encouragement if you're a USC fan, that he knows his mistake, and now he's correcting it. The question now is going to be how long will it take for him to get that turned around?
And how much time are they going to allow him to turn it around?
That's what makes this season so important for USC.
100%. So let's dive into this thing, guys, and let's talk about some specifics. We'll start on Lincoln Riley's favorite side of the football, and that would be go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I just that's fine. I wanted to
did I miss some stuff?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of we can bring that up in the last part, so that's fine. We'll bring the schedule stuff up at the last part.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I saw the schedule. I didn't want to go deep into the. Gotcha. Okay, so like I said, we are going to jump into Lincoln Riley's favorite side of the football, and we're going to talk some offense. And Brian, I'll throw it to you first. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to recap the 24 season and what they looked like offensively en route to their 7-6 record, and what that looked like offensively last year.
Well, it wasn't pretty.
No, it wasn't.
I mean, that was the biggest surprise from last season, guys, is I felt that, well, I don't know how good USC is going to be, but, they're at least going to score some points and they're going to put some numbers up. And the reality is they really didn't. And when you look at these numbers last year, USC ranking 51st in scoring offense, I would not have dreamed of that. They ranked 23rd in yards per game. That's pretty good, but it's not really good for what USC's used to doing. I mean, that's the thing is even the year before, when USC went 8-5, they weren't very good in 2023, but they still scored 41.8 points per game and still averaged. They were still 10th in the country at 467 yards per game. So those were big drop-offs in just 1 year. They didn't run the football very well or very often. They actually ran it decently when they ran it. And I think that's part of that lack of identity thing, Trev, that you're talking about. Is at Oklahoma, they ran the ball well. Why did he run the ball well there? Well, number one, that's what Bob Stoops demanded. And you had one of the best O-line coaches in the game in Bill Bedenbaugh. It just was a part of who you are. You're good on third down. You're 10th in the country in passing yards. Like, okay, look, dude, 23rd in yards per game, 25th in yards per play. You're 21st in yards per attempt as a runner. You're 10th in yards, passing yards per game. You're 27th in red zone offense, 23rd in red zone touchdown offense. Why weren't you better? It's not as simple as just saying you ranked 97th in turnovers. That's part of it. You ranked 121st in interceptions. That's part of it. But the other part of it is you weren't a very efficient passing offense last year. Yes, you ranked 10th in yards, but you were 79th in yards per attempt and 101st in yards per completion. That's not what you expect to see from a USC football team. It's not what you expect to see from a Lincoln Riley-led football team. And you could look at the yards per play and say, hey, 6.3 is pretty good. They averaged 7.4 the year before. That's a whole over yard plus per game. That's a big drop off. And so you start to understand it's not a lot of the yards, guys, I felt were like hollow yards. They would put up yards, but you watch them play and you're like, yeah, well, I just wasn't impressed by that performance. I wasn't really blown away. And then you look at it and it's like 5-0. Well, actually, let's see here. You look at the start of the season, 544 against Utah State, and it's just kind of like,
well, can we, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you watch the Notre Dame USC game, after Notre Dame, scores those 2 touchdowns, the defensive touchdowns at the end, USC goes down and scores 2 touchdowns, and puts up a bunch of yards and 14 points. And so you want to talk about hollow yards,
Right.
Notre Dame dominated a lot of that game, but then on paper, it looks a little bit different at the end because of those last couple scores where I don't want to say Notre Dame was phoning it in, but it's like they kind of felt like that game was over and USC kept, turning out yards and points.
They had so USC actually finished that game with 557 yards. But at the drive after the pick six that made it 42-28, which basically put the game away.
Right.
It made it 42-28. USC tries to go down and score late, and they get 68 yards on that, or 62 yards on that drive. And then they go down, and Notre Dame picks them off again in the end zone, runs it back. Now it's 49-28. And then USC goes down again on a 75-play drive and scores a touchdown and make it 49-35. Game was over. They put up 137 yards on those last two drives.
Right. To my point.
Now, they still had 420.
100%.
And that's not terrible, but Notre Dame played poorly to get there. But you just look at some of their performances. You had 544 against Utah State. You had 447 and 7.5 per play against LSU. There were moments last year. You tore up Rutgers, 8.7 yards per play. There were moments last year where the offense showed promise, but it just couldn't get the job done. I mean, 5.2 yards per play against Michigan, but you only ran the ball for 96 yards, and then Michigan runs the clock out on you late in the game. And so I think when you look at this offense, it's just you expect to see USC with a lot of single digits on here. There was none. The highest that they ranked was 10th in passing yards per game, but they needed way, way too many throws to get to that number of passing attempts. I mean, Caleb Williams in 2023, that offense, just do the whole offense, passed for 4,329 yards, averaged 330 passing yards per game. They attempted 461 passes. Last year, USC passed for 3,795 yards. So that's 500 or so less? They threw the ball 534 times. That's 73 more times, I think is the math top of my head. More times to get 500 less yards. That's an incredible lack of efficiency. So when you look at USC, that's the biggest thing that they're going to have to turn around on offense this year is they've got to get back to being an explosive and efficient offense. And it really started, guys, it didn't start last year. It actually started the year before. If you go back and look at some of the performances over the second half of the year in 2023, you started to see that a little bit from them where the offense would put up some hollow yards and some hollow numbers in games. And if they can't get that kind of turned around, it's like the UCLA game in 2023. They passed for 384 yards. Great job, guys. It looks like they rushed for 3. The Oregon game, they lost by 9. They passed for 306 yards. Great. They ran for 73. Louisville, they threw for 372 yards. Wonderful. You rushed for 71 against a Louisville team that had half their team out of that game. And so you saw these things kind of start to rear their ugly head. And, of course, their offense just got annihilated when it played Notre Dame in 2023. This started late last year. It just became worse when you no longer had Caleb Williams.
Well, I mean, I think the issue goes even beyond Caleb Williams. You just look at Lincoln Riley's track record as a head coach. Last year was the first year he didn't have a marquee quarterback under center for him in his entire time of being a head coach. He takes over for Oklahoma. First year, he has Baker Mayfield. Then he goes to Kyler Murray. Then he goes to Jalen Hurts in 2019. Then even in 2020 and 2021, 2020, you had Spencer Rattler. You go 9-2, and then you win your bowl game that you're in. And then in 2021, they made the transition over to Caleb Williams, who then followed you to USC and won the Heisman. Last year was the first year that Lincoln Riley didn't have that guy at quarterback. Regardless of what people's opinions are on Spencer Rattler, Miller Moss or Jaden Maeva are not Spencer Rattler. And so Spencer Rattler started a couple games last year in the NFL. And so, Lincoln Riley and his offense puts a lot of weight on quarterback play, a lot of weight. It also helps when you have elite skilled talent. But USC's wide receiver core was not the issue last year. They had their problems, a lot of mouths to feed, but talent was not the issue for them last year. And so, I'm going to be really interested to see what he does this year with Jaden Maeva. But again, that goes back down to the identity conversation. can Lincoln Riley figure out a way to win and build off of the performance that Woody Marks had last season? He was an 1,000-yard rusher. Can he? Maybe. Or is he going to fall victim to, don't worry, now Jade Maeva's our guy, and this is what he did against Notre Dame, and we're going to be what we look like at Oklahoma in 2018. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now, Vince, they're not going into a situation where they have a bare cupboard on offense. And I think that's going to be, as we kind of dive into expectations for 2025.
Right.
There's some talent there to work with.
Oh, there's absolute talent there to work with. And, I'm interested to see, if they have to put the pieces together, right? Mm-hmm. Like Lincoln Riley needs to put these pieces together. They didn't have a solidified situation at quarterback. Obviously, they had a change in the middle of the season last year. Now they're coming into the season with who they think, with Maeava as the quarterback, thinking that they've got their guy. What is that going to look like moving forward? There's the depth chart for the offense and what that looks like. Jaden Maeava, it's Jaden Maeava or bust, because behind him is obviously a true freshman. So,
talented one, but a true freshman.
Absolutely talented one, but a true freshman nonetheless. And, can a true freshman thrive in Lincoln Riley's system and all of those different things? That's a whole other conversation for maybe next year's conversation about USC if we do USC next year. But no, can he, as a head coach, as Lincoln Riley as a head coach, can he have success if his offense isn't elite? I think that's a legitimate question, Brian.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair question, which leads me to the question of, can this offense be elite?
Right.
I mean, I think that's the thing. Trev, you brought up Jaden Maeava, and somebody in the chat's talking about how he doesn't think Jaden Maeava is getting enough national attention. He looked really good against Notre Dame, and I'm like, yeah, he looked against Notre Dame, but even in that game, he only averaged 7.3 yards per attempt. I mean, we remember the big throws he made, but we missed a lot of the throws that he missed. He went 27 of 49.
Right.
In his 4 starts at the end of the year, he averaged 7.4, 6.3, 7.3, and 7.6 yards per game, and he had 6 interceptions in 4 starts. He had 11 touchdowns, but 6 interceptions in 4 starts. Like that's not great football. He completed less than 60% of his passes in each of his last 3 games as a starter. That's not good. And you weren't, other than Notre Dame, you weren't playing exactly great pass defenses. And now he did play well against Notre Dame, and he had some big throws against Texas A&M as well. And if you're USC, you're hoping that he carries that performance into this season. But I do think there's a little bit of a, you got to show it to me type of thing. And the reason that concerns me is he was a bit of a turnover guy at UNLV as well. If you look at his start to his career, his first 6 games at USC, first 7 games at USC, he only turned it over 2 times. But in his last 7 starts at UNLV, I said USM at UNLV, in his last 7 starts at UNLV, he turned it over 8 times. So that means in his last 11 starts, he's thrown 14 picks. Like, that's not good. And that he's going to have to protect the ball better and be a better decision maker. Now, the good news is he's got a pretty live arm. He's a big kid. He's a pretty mobile guy. I wouldn't call him like an elite runner. He's a pretty mobile guy. And they're going to need him to carry that team. The concern I have, guys, if I'm looking at it from a USC standpoint, is can he run the same kind of offense that Lincoln Riley's always run? That's a bigger question. And are they going to lean into maybe more of the quarterback run game a little bit more this year? I really don't know the answer to that question. And that's where I'm a little curious, because when I look at USC, I see a team that's got some talent, but I don't see a roster that's built to run the offense the way he's always run it. I mean, Jaden Maeava in his last 3 games at USC has had -2 rushing yards. He has more rushing touchdowns than he has rushing yards, 3 to -2. And then the first start, he only had 20 yards. So he's not Kyler Murray. He's not Jalen Hurts as a runner. So I really don't know what to expect from how they're going to build around him. Even at UNLV, he only rushed for 277 yards. He's a pretty mobile athlete, but he's not like a runner. He hasn't proven himself to be a runner. So I think it really starts at the top. The good news for him is he does have a pretty good receiving core to throw to. It's a very different looking receiving core, though. A lot more size in this year's receiving core. I don't know that they're going to be able to kind of run the offense the way they did last year. They ran a ton of quick game last year. I think one of the things that helped them against Notre Dame is they started throwing the ball down the field a lot more against Notre Dame. And I don't know that Notre Dame was prepared for it. And we saw that kind of carry over a little bit more into the bowl game. That's where you've got to use Jaden Maeva's skill set. He's not a let's throw quick game, screen game, RPOs all game. He's a big arm kid that I want to see him getting the ball down the field. So you've got Jacoby Lane, who I know Trev's real high on. You bring in Prince Strachan, who's 6'5". Makai Lemon's 5'11", but he's got ball skills of a guy that plays bigger than 5'11", in my opinion. So, you okay? Okay. I know how that feels. There's talent there. Running backs, let's see. No, but when I look at the receivers, Trev, and the tight ends together, Walker Lyons is a former big-time tight end that was away from the program for a year on a mission. Now he's back for a second year. I'm curious to see what he does as well. I think the point that Trevor has made, I'm going to kick it over to you, Trev, because I want you to build on it. When we've talked about USC in the past is the less is more for them this year in the pass game. You had to keep way too many kids happy. It's like Vince, in about 5 years, it's going to be a little bit easier for y'all to feed your family when a few of these kids are no longer in the house. You know, it's like you don't got to worry about as many people, as many mouths to feed. Now it's like, okay, Makai Lemon's your number one. Jacoby Lane's a great complimentary piece, a legit number two potential guy. Prince Strachan's a pure, complimentary piece. You got nice backups, and then you got your tight ends who are reliable and talented. Where last year you had like 7 guys you had to try to keep happy. And that can get real hard on the quarterback. I'm curious to see what Jaden Maeva can do when it's like, okay, I know who my dudes are. And I know what because you're got to learn 7 or 8 different skill sets of guys that you're constantly rotating in and out of the game. Now it's like, okay, Makai's going to be on the field a ton. Jacoby's going to be on the field a ton. Lake McCree is going to be on the field a ton. Walker Lyons is going to be on the field a ton. I also want to see how much 12 personnel USC does this year. That is a very underrated part of what Lincoln Riley used to do at Oklahoma. Remember when he had Mark Andrews and then he had you were talking about it the other day, Trev, like that H-back?
Yeah,
they
Dimitri
still throw the
Flowers.
ball a ton, but they could run more. I think you've got the potential to do more of that at USC this year and still have a passing threat because both Lake McCree and especially Walker Lyons are legit pass catchers. So there's some opportunities here for this offense to get pretty good if Jane Maeva can take a year or two jump in Lincoln Riley's system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the common themes that I brought up this show is Lincoln Riley's previous track record, because I do love him as an offensive coach. One of the things he always had at Oklahoma was his core stable of guys. And that's, I believe, what he has now this year at USC. Look, this is a pass catching unit I put in my top 10 heading into this season. And I've been very consistent with my thoughts on Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane and Lake McCree and Walker Lyons. Not necessarily so much Prince Strachan. So I'm very much on the same boat as what you guys are. But you go back and look at his previous offenses at Oklahoma, and it had star power. You had Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews and C.D. Lamb and Dimitri Flowers in his first year as a head coach. But that was it. It wasn't a lot of like, for example, last season at USC, they had Makai Levin and Jacoby Lane and Zachariah Branch and Kyron Hudson and Deuce Robinson and Lake McCree. Those are a lot of mouths to feed on offense. A lot.
Well, to your point, Trev, his last year at Oklahoma that they made the playoff in 2019, that year, Jalen Hurts passed for over 3,800 yards that year. He only had 2 receivers that had over 19 catches.
Yeah.
C.D. Lamb had 62 for 1,327, and Charleston Rambo had 43 for 743. Everybody else was a complimentary, to your point, was a complimentary player to those guys. And, you look at the year before and spread it around a little bit more, but you had Marquise Brown and Hollywood Brown and C.D. Lamb were 1,000-yard receivers. Lee Morris went 21 for 457. Grant Calcaterra, your tight end, was 26 for 396. Carson Meyer, your fullback, was 19 for 327. Your number 4 receiver was down there with Charleston Rambo with 8 catches for 125 yards. So to your point, they have been in year 2017, Their number 1 leading receiver was Marquise Brown. Their number 2 leading receiver was a tight end, Mark Andrews. Their number 3 leading receiver was CeeDee Lamb. Their number 4 leading receiver was Dimitri Flowers, who you're talking about, their H-back. And so they spread the ball around a little bit, but there was always that 2 dudes at the top that dominated the offense, which made your quarterback, it was 2 guys and then a bunch of complementary weapons. Last year, you had 6 guys that wanted to be the man.
Yep.
And that Lincoln Riley was trying to keep happy and be the man so that they didn't transfer. They all left. And I think it's going to actually work out for them because you had some dudes stay. You had some dudes left, but it clearly wasn't working for you.
Yeah.
You couldn't keep everybody happy. And Deuce Robinson is a very different player from Mekhi Lemon, who's a very different player from Kyron Hudson. So I think the consistency of I know my guys is going to allow also Lincoln Riley as a play caller to, because what you're going to call when Deuce Robinson is in the game is going to be different than what you're going to call when Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane is in the game. And I think it's going to allow him to, last year was the most disjointed I've ever seen Lincoln Riley as a play caller.
Yeah.
It wasn't vintage Lincoln Riley. And I do believe, guys, a big problem was he was trying to keep too many people happy. And you just can't call a game when you're trying to get 7 different receivers into the flow of the game. And that's why I honestly think, and it's going to sound crazy, I think there's a little bit of addition by subtraction here when you look at this USC receiving core, especially since Mekhi Lemon stayed. Because honestly, I think he was their most consistently, like that was the guy that I watched on film and said, that's the guy I'm worried about against Notre Dame's nickel. And that showed up in the game against Notre Dame last year.
Yeah. I mean, their 2 leading receivers stayed. That's huge. I would have a different tune around this offense. Yes, addition by subtraction still, but I'd have a different feel if it was, let's say, if Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch stayed opposed to Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. I don't know if I would have had these as a top 10 pass catching unit. But we're talking about over 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards receiving being freed up to targets 2 guys like Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane and Lake McCree and Walker Lyons. I mean, that's going to be very beneficial for Jaden Maeva in this offense. Now, it still has its questions, like we'll get to, but just the skill position alone between quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end, I'm extremely high on this group. I really am.
Now, the question is, guys, when you look at the offensive side of the ball, is can this part of the line perform? And that ultimately has been a bit of an Achilles heel for USC the last couple of years. Once again, they are trying to go through the portal and repair the offensive line. And we're going to see if it can work out better this time than it did last time. You brought in John Ray Reed from Syracuse, where he was pretty good last season for Syracuse. Yeah. You brought in DJ Wingfield from Purdue, who was okay at Purdue, I think is about as fair as saying. I think he's a better player than he performed. I think he was dragged down by the overall performance and lack of consistency in the line. There was guys injured and out and things like that. I think the starting center was out most of the year, and they had issues at tackle, keeping guys healthy. And I think DJ suffered from that. I think his performance suffered from that. And then you've obviously got Alana Noah's back. Elijah Page goes into year 2 as a starter. I'm expecting a big jump for Elijah Page. He struggled last year. They kind of threw him to the wolves a little bit. That's going to happen with young guys. I kind of like what we talk about with Anthony Knapp at Notre Dame. Second full year as a starter, I expect more from Elijah Page. He's a talented kid. And then you've got to, the interiors, your 2 transfers have got to perform. And then, of course, at right tackle, you've got Tobias Raymond. So they lost some good players in the offensive line, but I don't think I never felt like their offensive line ever got any kind of continuity last season.
Yeah.
And I think that was another big reason for the struggles was that. I mean, you couldn't, and I never thought Jonah Monheim was full strength either. I mean, he played all but 1 game last year, but he wasn't his normal self, just kind of dealing with a lot of the injuries he's dealt with the year before, the previous years. But getting Alana and Noah got a lot of experience last year. I think getting Tobias Raymond to perform better and getting Elijah Page to take a year 2 jump is going to be a very important piece to this line being able to go out and thrive this season.
Yeah, offensive line and running back are my 2 biggest questions for this offense. If the offensive line can play together, specifically center, right guard, I mean, getting 2 interior guys from the portal, relying on them coming in starting week 1, that's going to be rough. And then Elijah Page, I don't want to say rough, but it's a question mark. And then if Elijah Page can make that jump, you feel pretty confident about Maeva's blind side, but yeah, it's that running back are the two. I would have a much different tune about this offense as a whole if they were able to retain Quentin Joyner, because I really liked what I saw from him when he played against Notre Dame. Liked what I saw from him for the majority of last season, but right now the running back room is what it is. Brian Jackson, I think, played a little bit against Notre Dame. They got the Wayman Jordan kid from Hutchinson Community College, and then they also got the kid from New Mexico. So definitely another makeshift running back room. It's going to be interesting to see from how they perform, going from Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner to them.
One of the biggest mistakes that I believe that Lincoln Riley made last year was not using Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner more.
Agreed.
I think they were very impactful when he got them the ball. And I don't think this unit has as much talent as that unit. But it doesn't need to if the line can play better. And that's going to be the big key. That's really – this is all going to be determined by – like, we could be spot on about the receivers and tight ends and spot on about Jaden Maeva. But if the offensive line doesn't play as a unit, it's going to be tough to really turn this thing around. It's a very big offensive line. I mean, their smallest guy is 6'3", 310. You've got 6'7", 320 and 6'6", 315 on the outside. You got a 6'3", 320-pound center, a 6'3", 335-pound left guard. Your backups have some good size and spots. Like, you've got to get your offensive line short up. Tobias Raymond's going to be a key to me. He's got some ability, but he started against A&M and allowed 3 pressures, and he also played a bunch against Michigan, and he gave up 4 pressures and 45 snaps. And that's not going to get it done. But he was young. He was a redshirt freshman, so he's going to have to kind of make a jump. They should be good up the middle, though, guys. Like, that's the thing. But you brought in John Ray Reed, but he's coming from an offense where you look at his numbers, Trev. What did you have? Something like
he allowed
15 pressures last season, only 4 hits plus sacks. Do you guys know how much Syracuse threw the football last year?
Yeah.
Like, Syracuse attempted 598 passes, and he only gave up 4 plus hits. That means he's given up a hit on the quarterback, one every 120, 150-ish attempts.
Yeah.
Like, now for Lincoln Riley, that's one every 3 games sometimes. But I'm saying sarcastically, but they didn't run the ball very well, and that's kind of my question mark. But this is going to be the key to their offense. Is I think a lot of good things happened this offseason. Simplifying the receiving rotation, solid depth chart, solid guys in the backfield, in the portal. Quarterback comes back. This is the key right here to their offense getting back on track. And do I expect them to look like they did scoring points-wise that they did 2 years ago or 3 years ago? No, but you got to find that happy medium. You got to be a touchdown better than you were last year. That's a big key for me. You got to be a touchdown better. They were at, what did we have them at? 30.4 last year, right? Or wasn't that where they were last year? 30.4?
Yeah.
30.2. You got to be a touchdown better. Because I don't think they need to score as much as they did 2 years ago, because I don't expect their defense to be as bad as it was 2 years ago. When you're giving up 34.4 a game, you got to score 40 a game.
Yep.
They took 10 off their – here's what killed USC. They took 10 points off their points per game allowed last year on defense. The problem is their offense dropped more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And that can't happen. But I really think the offensive line is going to be the key to making that work.
So before we jump to the other side of the football, guys, what does offensive success look like to you in order for USC to have the season that USC wants to have? Not that anybody here necessarily wants them to have, but for USC, what they want them to have. What does offensive success look like, Trev?
Yeah, I mean, in short, I would say it kind of gets summed up by 2 things. One, offensive line play has to be shored up. Very similar to the conversation we had when we were talking Notre Dame offensive line. Everything starts up front with the big boys, and they gotta play better than what they did. Then turnovers also need cleaned up. Both quarterbacks turned the ball over quite a bit last season, and it's hard to score points when you're donating the football away. And so you're really going to have to do a better job of protecting the football, whether it's Jaden Maeva or, last couple of seasons, Lincoln Riley's made changes mid-year. I don't see that happening with Maeva. but he's going to have to do a much better job of taking care of the football this year. I mean, you go and you look at how he ended the regular season last year, and, we're talking about a kid who had, 11 passing touchdowns with 6 interceptions, and that's over
touchdown
the course
numbers pretty good.
Yeah, touchdown numbers fantastic, but over the course of a season, 6 interceptions is going to start to add up in the sample size that we've seen him. So offensive success for me is it's more consistent. And how are you more consistent? Better offensive line play, and you're not turning over the football as much.
Hey, Trev, 11 touchdowns and 4 starts over the course of a 12-game regular season is 33 passing touchdowns. That's not bad.
Yeah.
And he also had, what was it, two or three rushing touchdowns? Let me pull up his numbers real quick. He had 4 rushing touchdowns in the regular season. So, and then during his starting stretch, he had 3. So if you add 9, that's 42 touchdowns over the course of a season. That's pretty good. But it's also 18 interceptions.
Yeah.
And unless you're Deshaun Watson, you're not getting away with 17, 18 interceptions. But that's regular season. Deshaun threw 17 picks in the regular season, plus the ACC title game, plus playoff games against Ohio State and Alabama. Like, that's the thing. It's protecting the football better. That's a big part of it. I also think, Trev, they've got to get back to being more efficient and explosive.
Oh, yeah.
They were not a very explosive offense last year. They could never get into a rhythm because of the things we talked about earlier. And they've got to be more efficient. I don't know what that's going to look like, because I think, like we said, they've had to change their receiver rotation and do some different things. But what I can say definitively is this offensive line, or this offense, has to be more efficient. They can't have the wild ups and downs. They can't be as streaky as they were last year. They've got to be able to consistently move the chains, which opens up opportunities for then some more big plays. But I also think that finding more balance, I don't expect USC to run the ball 200 yards a game. I don't think they're built for that. But he's got to get back to looking more like the coach he was at Oklahoma, where you had more balance. The thing that I said, and the concern that I've had, and I've said this for years about Lincoln Riley, is if you go look at his tenure at Oklahoma and you look at what he did his last year as the OC, they averaged 236.8 yards per game. Then Bob Stoops leaves because Bob Stoops liked running the football. And in 2017, they were at 217.8. 2018, they jumped up to 247.4 with Kennedy Brooks and Kyler Murray both going for 1,000 yards. But a lot of that was scrambles and looked like, okay, they're back to being Oklahoma. But then the next year, they were at 240, a lot more quarterback scrambles, a lot more quarterback runs. And then when they lost the ability to have a quarterback to do that, they dropped all the way down to 179.3. And then in his last year, they're 186.6. And they looked much different than they did when he was there. And if you also consider they were doing that in the league with pretty bad defenses. Comes to USC, year 1, they rushed for 171. Year 2, they rushed for 134. Last year, they run for 145. Like, you've got to get back to at least being a 180 to 190 yards per game team running the football. Because when teams are just defending your pass, most good teams can shut that down. I mean, Notre Dame did a poor job. A lot of what hurt Notre Dame last year was they just played poorly. Giving up blown coverages and just things they didn't do all year. Year before, they annihilated USC. And USC never had anything they could turn to keep you off balance. They've got to get back to being a more balanced team. I'm not saying that they got to throw it or run for it 220 yards a game, but they've got to jump it by at least 30 yards, in my opinion, and be more efficient with it if they're going to be successful running the ball. Because, like I said, they were good when they ran the ball last year. They averaged 6.3 yards per play, and they averaged 5.2 yards per rush, but they just wouldn't use it. That's why I say, like, when Quentin Joyner in like the first half of that game against Penn State, they're running all over Penn State. And then they just went away from it, and Penn State comes roaring back. It just made no sense.
Let's jump over to the other side of the football, gentlemen, and talk some defense. Trevor, you want to give us a quick recap on the 24 season where USC did see some positive strides defensively, and just kind of recap where they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, the defense definitely took a step under DeAnton Lynn. Can they continue that stretch forward? my whole thing with USC, this is the side of the ball. We're talking big picture here real quick. This is the side of the ball, to me, that is going to determine how good this team can be. You go back through and you look at what they did last season. Look, you're in a different conference now. In the Big 12, when you're there and it's just a run and gun conference, like there's just going to be games where you give up 38 points because the other defense you're facing is even worse than you and is going to allow 50. This is kind of where the state of the Big 12 was when Oklahoma was there and when Lincoln Riley was the head coach. Big 10's a different animal. You can't be giving up 27 points to Michigan, that Michigan team. You go through, you gave up 33 to Penn State. You scored 30 points in overtime as well, but you scored 30 points against Penn State. Notre Dame didn't even reach 30 points against Penn State. You're giving up, you gave up 35 or 49 to Notre Dame when your offense even scored 35 points.
Did give up 2 pick sixes, but you're right.
But point being, defense has to get better. Like I do put faith in Lincoln Riley getting the offense turned around, especially with their addition by subtraction. This team is going to go as far as what the defense takes them. I truly believe that. This is the side of the ball to me that kind of unlocks the potential of their season.
I'll say this. I think if you look at these numbers, you're like, all right, why do you guys keep talking about D'Anton Lynn? They ranked 56th in scoring defense. They ranked 77th in yards per game, 87th in yards per play, 53rd in rushing yards, 86th in yards allowed per carry. You were 58th in forcing turnovers, 98th in passing yards allowed. You have 52nd in yards per attempt. You ranked 129th in completion percentage allowed. You were 100th in sacks, 69th in red zone defense. I don't understand why you guys keep talking about D'Anton Lynn. I'll show you why we keep talking about D'Anton Lynn. This is what they did the year before he arrived. Look at all the rankings. So last year, USC ranked in the 100s in 3 defensive categories. Now, they were in the 90s in 2 others, but 3 hundreds and 2 90s. In 2023, they ranked in the 100s in 3 rushing categories. They ranked in the 100s in 5 passing categories, plus 109th on third down, plus 110th on fourth down, plus 119th on red zone defense, plus 115th in red zone touchdown defense. So, Trev, I agree with you. They've got to get better on defense, but it's just keep doing what you're doing. Keep developing the way you're developing, because when you go from that number, and somebody just said, but that TFL, they did all that while ranking 26th in the country in tackles for loss and 49th in sacks. They were still terrible. 121st in scoring offense, 119th in total offense, 104th in yards per play. In one offseason, they jumped up to 56th in scoring. Now, that's got to get better, Trev, because you're USC. You shouldn't rank 56th in total off defense or scoring defense and 77th in total defense at USC. You're spot on. But you ranked 121st and 119th the year before. Under D'Anton Lynn, they dropped 10 points a game, and they dropped, I'm trying to do the math in my head, was about 55.7 yards per game. You dropped 0.3 yards per play. You allowed 10 fewer rushes of 20 yards or plays of 10 yards or more. Your rushing defense, you gave up 186.5 the year before. You dropped it down to 141.2. Your pass offense went from 246 to 235. That's not as big of a jump, but yards per attempt and yards per completion went from 93rd and 74th to 52nd and 12th. Now, let's also not ignore the fact that being in the Big Ten helped these numbers as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Big Ten just doesn't have the same number of juggernaut offensive football teams, if we're going to be completely honest about that.
Well, because to your point, Brian, the teams that USC played in 2023, they played a ranked Utah team, Notre Dame, Washington, Oregon. They played Louisville in a bowl game. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
Right. They played some very good football teams, but they got annihilated by those teams as well. USC ranked 12th out of 18 teams in the Big Ten in scoring last year. So this was an improvement. It's still not near good enough. But I don't care what league you're playing in, Trev. You go from one Power 5 league to another Power 5 league and drop off 10 points per game. And you also consider that included, you gave up 2 pick sixes against Notre Dame. And if my memory serves me correctly, those were not the only touchdowns their offense gave up last year. And special teams gave up last year, if my memory serves me correctly. So I do think there are some aspects of it. Let me just go look at this real quick. They gave up let's go to interceptions. They gave up 4 pick sixes on the year. 4. They gave up 2 to Notre Dame. They also gave up a pick 6 to Wisconsin, and they gave up a pick 6 to actually no, that Wisconsin did that to them. Who were the other 2? I have to go look those up. But they gave up 4 offensive touchdowns last season. And so you're talking about over a 10-point jump. That's improvement. Now, the question is, in year 2 under D'Anton Lynn, is this the new normal, or is there another level that they're going to get to? That's the question for USC. And if they can drop off, I mean, here's the thing for me, if USC, their defense doesn't have to look like Notre Dame's did last year, or like Ohio State's did last year, or like Penn State's did last year. It just has to drop off another 3-4 points a game. To your point, Trev, play better in some of the big games. Yes, Notre Dame had 2 pick sixes, but you still give up 35 points to Notre Dame. You know, I mean, you still allowed Notre Dame to kind of move the ball up and down the field on you. You know, you did a great job jumping out to a 23 lead against Penn State, but then they absolutely annihilated you in the second half and you couldn't stop them. You know, you let Tyler Warren have like one of the greatest. I mean, the defensive game plan against Tyler Warren in that game was one of the worst I've ever seen.
I just don't think they had one.
I mean, they didn't have a plan. Not that they didn't execute; they just didn't have a plan for it.
Yeah.
And so, I just look at it and say, you made a big jump, but you've got to make another one. If you can just get down to like 20 to 21, get the yards per play just closer to 5, which isn't great. But if you can do that and your offense can just add a touchdown, USC's a 9-win team this year. Like, there's no doubt. And then if you can drop off a touchdown off of this and get down to like 17, that's a big ask. That's a real big ask. Now you're talking about maybe you've got a shot to compete in the Big Ten if your offense can get back on track and add a touchdown. But you also got to make sure you're doing that to where it's not like Notre Dame was in 2023, where they had this big gap in scoring. They were over 39 a game, and because they were hanging, 58 on Pitt and Oregon State giving them, 40 and giving Tennessee State over 40 and giving NC State over 40, but then you couldn't score on Louisville. You couldn't score on Ohio State. You couldn't score on Duke. You couldn't score on Clemson. Like, it's got to be all the time. But to your point, Trev, I think this side of the ball continuing to improve is going to be a key for USC. The question is going to be, as we dive into this final part, is can they do it? So we're going to bring up the USC defensive depth chart here in a second and take a peek at that. Good, Vince.
Yeah, that's going to be that is going to be a big question mark for sure. Can the defense take another positive jump in 2025? Because they did cut down on a lot of those. Let's be honest, terrible rankings on defense. They cut down on it big time in 24. Can they take another considerable jump in 25? That way, there isn't the excuse of, well, you're going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, not playing as explosive offenses. You take some of that out of the mix.
But like even in 2023, they gave up 396 to San Jose State. They gave up 564 to Colorado, 506 to Arizona, 482 to Utah, 527 to Cal.
Right.
It wasn't just – Notre Dame only had 251 yards of offense against them because they had multiple defensive touchdowns. They were starting the drives at like in USC territory.
Right.
It's like you got a kick return for a touchdown. It's like Notre Dame's offense didn't really have the ball that much. Imagine what those numbers would have looked like if Notre Dame had to go the length of the field in certain drives. It's like, wow, that was pretty rough performance. So it wasn't like going to the Big Ten helped, but it wasn't like they only gave up a bunch of yards to Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, in Arizona the year before. They were getting ripped by Cal. They were getting ripped by San Jose. And that's the thing is like, it's progress, but it needs to be more. And as we look at this defense, I think it all starts up front for me, Trev. When you look at when you talk about strengths, I think the first thing you got to do when you talk about strengths, though, is I do have a lot more confidence that they have a staff in place to make the necessary changes. Like, that's a big part of this. If Alex Grinch is still their defensive coordinator, you're like, that 24 was all Big Ten related. I mean, I honestly would have no faith that they're going to be any better this year. Like, no, they're going to struggle. They're going to shut down Northwestern and Missouri State and teams like that. But when they get to play Michigan and Notre Dame and teams like that, Oregon, they're going to get shredded. I think Danton Lynn, Eric Henderson on D-line, Doug Belk is their DB coach, who actually interviewed for the D coordinator job at Notre Dame when they hired Al Golden. That's how much Marcus Freeman thinks of him. He was one of the 3 or 4 finalists for that job. That was a savvy offseason. It wasn't just Danton Lynn. It was Danton Lynn plus a good staff with him. Now they got to really make their money and make it even better this season.
Yeah, I mean, the defensive staff is night and day better than what it was in 2023. I mean, Alex Grinch, for all intents and purposes, is basically what Brian Van Gorder was for Notre Dame in 2016. Just absolutely, it was bad. So they absolutely have the staff in place, but you go and you look at what the strengths of his defense are, and the front 7 or front 6 now, I guess you could call it, but defensive line and linebackers are a strength. First of all, this is a gigantic unit.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very big.
We don't even have Jarrett on here.
No.
Like the kid they got from Georgia that's 6'5", 350. He's not even on here. This, just so people know, this is the Athlon Sports preseason magazine 2D. So we had made just 2 small adjustments, but there's some other guys on here. But continue, Trev.
This is a very, very long unit. Don't see a whole lot of 6'6" linebackers that aren't like 3-4 edge rusher, like outside linebackers. I mean, this guy's a 4.25 linebacker at 6'6", 225. You go and you look at the interior of their defensive line. One of the bigger ones that Notre Dame is going to face this year, 6'5", 293, 6'4", 331. The guys rotating in are 6'5", 290, and 6'2", 335. It's a very big unit. They have very long edge rushers. Braylon Shelby and Anthony Lucas are both 6'5" kids. I mean, this is a very
Cameron
long
Fountain
unit.
is a long kid. He may start also over Shelby at 6'5", 260.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a front 6 here that the smallest guy is a 6'3", 232-pound linebacker, and he's the smallest.
Yeah.
It's a very long, big group, but they have talent too. They're not just big space eaters that can't move and can't get after the quarterback. Like this is an athletic group as well.
Eric Gentry was on a roll statistically to start the season last year, fellas. Like if you go back and look at his numbers, he led the team with 6.5 tackles for loss last season and was tied for 3rd on the team with 2 sacks. Pretty good, right? Played 5 games. Played 5 games and led the team with 6.5 tackles for loss. Losing him hurt them because what happened is they had to go to a bunch of small guys. Like they had short 5'11", 6-foot linebackers. Giving him gave them a tall, rangy kind of – so you kind of had some mix of skills. They're going to be much longer and I think more athletic and just rangier on linebacker this year. They had good, smart box players last year, and I think that helped them. I think those guys fit the Big Ten pretty well, fit their schedule pretty well. But when you look at their 2025 schedule and you look at the teams that USC has to play this year, you're going to need more athleticism at linebacker. And I think they're going to have that with that group. And then, of course, Eric Gentry can get after the quarterback. But, you went to the portal again and your defensive line. You got Jamal Jarrett, who hasn't played a ton at Georgia last year, but he's a big kid. You got Keyshawn Silver from Georgia. I think he transferred from Kentucky, and I think he transferred to Kentucky from North Carolina, I believe, correct? He's a big old kid, and he's a plugger. I mean, he had, 26 tackles, 1 tackle for loss and a sack last year, Trev?
Yep.
But you're not bringing him in there to rush the quarterback and you're bringing him in there to occupy 2 blockers.
Yeah.
I like their, like Jamal Muhammad was a nice player last year. I think they're more athletic on the edge now. They need Anthony. The big key for USC up front is they need Anthony Lucas to stay healthy and get back and play like the big-time recruit he was coming out of high school.
Yeah.
He's been a pretty disappointing player so far. At times he hasn't played well. At times, honestly, Trevor, he hasn't been healthy, but at times it's just like, does this kid even want to be out there?
Agreed.
He's very inconsistent player in a lot of ways. I mean, he's got talent. I don't think that there's any doubt about whether or not he's got talent. I mean, not just because I loved him coming out of high school, but you look at him and you see plays where you're like, dude, that guy that guy's pretty good, but he's going now into his 5th year, and he's yet to record a sack at USC. Yet to record a sack. He's had 4.5 tackles for loss in 3 years. Now, part of that's because he's been injured a lot. Like last year, he only played 7 games. And as a freshman, he only played 7 games. So he's got to stay healthy. But the talent is still there. It's just what's his want to? That's my big question. But they'll have some ability in the front 7. And they've got a defensive line coach who came from the NFL, came from the Rams. So how quickly he can – and then Jakeem Stewart was a reclassified kid. He should have been in the 26 class. He reclassified to 25, top 5-star recruit. He could play on the edge. He could play inside. He's a big old stud kid from Louisiana. He should help them as well this year. But plenty of size, plenty of length, plenty of talent. It's just can they put it all together and just play consistently disciplined football? That's the big thing, Trev, is play consistently disciplined football. I think the concern that I have is on the back end. Look, you and I talked about you got to stop going to the portal. Vince nailed it. They had to go to the portal in the secondary this year. And because if they'd have tried to keep all the guys, their secondary would have been pretty bad. I like DJ Harvey a lot, the kid they got from San Jose State. He's undersized, but it's very smart, tough kid. Knows how to play, plays good angles. You got Chasen Johnson from UCF. Don't know what kind of player he's going to be, but I know he's athletic. You got Bishop Fitzgerald from NC State, who was a very productive player for NC State last season. Looking at Trev's numbers, you look at Chasen Johnson. I think he only played, 4 games last year, Trev, something like that. Had 18 tackles and 2 breakups. Bishop Fitzgerald transfers in. He had 55 tackles, 8 pass breakups, 3 interceptions last season for NC State. Kamari Ramsey's going into year 2 at USC, but year 4 of playing under Danton Lynn because he came over from UCLA. He's a very good football player. Kennedy Urlacher, who honestly, guys, he's a good football player. He just was buried in a Notre Dame depth chart that's just ridiculously deep, but that's a really good pickup for them because he gives them, you want to get better against the run, play Kennedy Urlacher more. I mean,
yeah,
it's a real easy recipe to being better against the run. Is play, and Prophet Brown's a solid nickel. So there's talent there, fellas. And then of course, the Carlos Nicholson, he was a transfer last year, correct? Didn't he come from Mississippi State, or I'm actually going to look this up, but they needed to go to the portal, and I think they got good players. The question is going to be, he transferred from Mississippi State last year. So he was there in 23, so I was correct. But he's going into year 2 in the system under Danton Lynn. There's some potential there for this secondary to be better than it was a year ago. I think there's absolutely potential for it to be better than it was a year ago. They just got to go out and prove it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, on paper, this is a decent-looking secondary. But again, it just goes back to the transfer portal conversation that we have. How quickly can you build chemistry? Danton Lynn going into year 2, how quickly can he get them to play as a unit? Mm-hmm. That's a big skill because you can have a long, athletic, physical, big front 7 or front 6, but if your cornerbacks can't cover, it's not going to mean a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so when I look at this, the majority of their players in the 2 deep are all from the portal. How quickly can you build chemistry? How well can you play together as a unit? It's going to be a big, big question. Big question.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think at the bare minimum, I think they repeat what they did last year on defense. I do. Just because I do have some faith in their coaching. I think you have a higher number of guys. I mean, yes, there's a lot of portal guys, Trev, but of their projected starters, see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of their projected starters are returners. Now, there's a lot of 2 deep guys that out of the portal. Keyshawn Silver's from the portal, obviously. Desmond Stevens is the guy they got out of high school, so he's not a transfer guy. Gentry's not a transfer guy. Ramsey's a transfer guy, but he transferred a year ago. Nicholson's a transfer guy, but he transferred a year ago. So those guys are returners now. And so a lot of your safety and corner, yes, you have some impact there. But those are positions where I think a newcomer can come in and make an impact. We've seen that at Notre Dame. Notre Dame in the last 2 years has had a first-year guy step in a nickel and thrive. Rod Hurd came over and switched positions and was a very good rotation player for Notre Dame. it's up front where you don't want to have to live and die by the portal. And they're not doing that as much in this year on defense, except for one starter and some depth. I think USC has a chance to knock another 3-4 points off their points per game average and just be better. Are they going to look like, oh man, this is a vintage, Pete Carroll USC defense? No, they don't have the talent to do that. They have good talent. They don't have, like, this isn't an elite roster that's just waiting to be unleashed to be a top 10 defense. I don't see that kind of talent here, but I do see enough talent to be a top 30 to 35 defense. Like, I do think they can get that. It's just whether or not they can put it all together, like you said, Trev, and if D'Anton Lynn can just get them to play consistent football, let your talent take over. I mean, like you saw early in the year, there was a hit that Kamari Ramsey had on the kid. You're like, yeah, this never would have happened last year. You remember that play against USC where Kamari Ramsey came up and laid a guy out, and you're like, this would not have happened at USC last year.
Yep.
So I think that the foundation he laid was good, and I don't think that they maxed out last year.
Yeah.
I don't. Just the question is, how much better can they get? That's the question. So, and I think that ultimately is going to determine the defense's improvement will determine the floor of this team. The ceiling of this team will be how much better the offense can get ultimately. That's what I think.
Well, that's a great segue. So let's jump into our thoughts on the schedule and our predictions for USC and what that looks like moving forward. And, toughest stretches, kind of whatever direction that you want to go in when it comes to the schedule and the season and all of those different things. Trevor, I'm gonna throw it to you to kind of bring us home a little bit, and we'll kind of go around the horn and kind of talk about the schedule a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what their schedule goes, I mean, it's relatively favorable for USC this year to have a turnaround season.
I thought they played Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon and Washington every year.
And they play them all on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's all on the road, actually.
Yeah.
It's all cold for whatever reason that weekend. No, this year their schedule is relatively favorable. I mean, you go through and you look, and some of their away games are at places that are, I mean, I'm not going to count Oregon as like an away Big Ten game because back when they were in the Pac-12, they would rotate and play each other home and away anyways. Yes, I know on paper it's a Big Ten road game, but you would have played them if you were still in the Pac-12. So you go and you look, they're familiar with traveling to Notre Dame. That's nothing new to them. So you have to go to Purdue. You're in Indiana twice in the same year. That's a win. If USC loses to Purdue, then I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to be hanging out much longer in Los Angeles.
Yeah. He may not ever be back in Los Angeles.
I was going to say that'll be the old tarmac. That'll be the old tarmac firing and enjoy West Lafayette.
They're going to annihilate Purdue. Come on.
But you go and you look. Their farthest away game this year is Notre Dame. Like as far as distance.
Yeah.
And so that's a favorable schedule for them. Then you look at the opponents that you get at home. Yes, you play Michigan, but they're at home. Yes, you play Iowa, but you're at home. So I think their toughest road game is still going to be Notre Dame. Nebraska, I think the jury's still out on them. They have the potential to be much better this year, but I got to see it because I feel like I've said that the last 3 years about them. And so could be a difficult road game. Who knows? But and then at Illinois, I think is going to be an interesting game as well. That stretch of Michigan State at Illinois, bye week, home against Michigan, at Notre Dame, then another bye week, I think is going to be an interesting stretch for USC this year.
You missed something, Trevor.
What's that?
Do you know what the biggest game on the schedule is? The biggest, if you don't win, you're done game on the schedule is? Do you know which one it is?
My guess is probably the battle for LA.
Nope.
Which
Clay Helton returns to the Coliseum in week 2 as the head coach of the Georgia Southern Eagles.
There we go.
If you don't beat Clay, I'm being serious. If you don't beat Clay Helton in week 2, if you don't annihilate Clay Helton in week 2, then people are like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, you're not wrong.
Like
that's who we got rid.
Yes. Yes. You've got to. I think the schedule's set up very nicely for USC to start off well. Missouri State went 8-4 last year as an FCS team. They're now moving up. This is their first year as a D1 team. So I love how USC says, we've never still played another FCS team. Well, technically that's true, but you're playing Missouri State in their first ever game as an FBS team.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern is a quality group of 5 team. They went 8-5 last year. but a team that is nowhere close to you talent wise.
Nope.
Purdue is they're remade, but they're still
nowhere
not
near the
very good.
talent level as you.
I really like this Michigan State team, fellas. This to me is the first real test for them, but it's at home,
right?
And it's a game you should win.
Yes.
So I just think this schedule sets up real nicely for USC. Then after that, you've got a 4-game stretch that to me is going to determine your season. If you can go 2-2 at worst in your next 4 games, you're at Illinois on the 27th, then you have a bye, then you're home against Michigan, at Notre Dame, another bye, at Nebraska on November 1st. If you hold serve the way you're supposed to in the first 4 games, and if you can just go 2-2 in those games, your last 4 games, and look, that shouldn't be hard. Beat Michigan at home. You almost beat Michigan in the big house last year.
Yeah.
They had basically a walk-off 1-yard touchdown run. I think it was on 4th down. They converted like 2 4th downs at the end of the game to win that game. I don't think you're doing that to Danton Lynn's team in the middle of year 2, because part of the reason they went out and got a bunch of 330-pounders is because teams could do that to them last year.
Yep.
If you can, so you got to beat Michigan at home. It's going to be hard to beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. So that's 1-1. You've got to split road games at Illinois and at Nebraska. You got to win one of them, in my opinion. If you can go 2-2 out of that stretch, you're now in your last 4 games, home against Northwestern, who won't be good, home against Iowa, who I like Iowa this year. It's like Michigan State. I like Iowa this year, but it's at home. You should win that game. And then you end the season home against UCLA, another game you should win. So there, if you drop the Oregon game, you're 9-3. Like 9-3 is very possible for this USC football team if you can just beat all the teams you're supposed to beat. That's Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State, Iowa, Northwestern, and UCLA. Like, can we agree that those are teams based on your roster compared to theirs roster? You should win those games. So now we're getting down to Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Oregon. The 5 best teams you play, you only got to go 2-3. You got to beat the teams you're supposed to and just go 1 game under 500 in the other games. That's it. That's doable for USC. So when I look at their schedule, guys, you've got that nice warm-up part at the beginning of the season that gets you ready for Michigan State. That's the first game where we're going to be like, okay, this team, they might be okay if they can handle Michigan State. And then we really start to find out who they are that next month when they play Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, and Nebraska.
This could potentially be 3 tough road games.
Very.
You know what I mean?
Very.
Right in the heart of
but
your
if you're
schedule.
if you're USC, you got to win one of them. That's my whole
I
point.
agree.
I
agree.
4 tough road games. And I think the 4 toughest games in their schedule, somebody in the chat said this. They said their 3 toughest games this season are on the road. And they said it was Notre Dame, Oregon, and I think they said Illinois.
Yeah.
I would throw Nebraska in there because Nebraska played USC tough last year, and I just think Nebraska's going to be very good. I think you could argue that 4 of their 5 toughest games are all on the road. All I'm asking that you do is win the one game that's not on the road against Michigan, beat the other 7 teams that you're just going to have way better rosters than. All you got to do is go 1-3 in those 4 road games. That's it, 1-3. It's got to steal one of them over Illinois or Nebraska or Oregon or Notre Dame. It's got to steal one of them. If you do that, you're a 9-win football team, guys, and you're not going to be good enough to be in the playoffs.
But you're still 3 games better than you were the year before.
You are, and you're going into the offseason saying, hey, guys, look what we did. Yes, you're going to be bringing in a top recruiting class. Your quarterback still has eligibility left. You've got skill players that will still be coming back. A lot of your better off. I mean, Elijah Page can come back. Corey Raymond can come back. Now all of a sudden you start feeling, okay, we're not back, but we're back on track.
Yeah.
And I think that's the expectation. And honestly, guys, that's my prediction for USC this year.
9-3.
I predict them to go 9-3. I think the game for me that's going to determine whether I'm right or wrong is the Michigan State game on SPE the 20th. I don't know why I got that one back. It's supposed to say SEP 20, but SPE 20, SPE-tember 20th on that one.
Good old September, baby.
Thanks for none of you guys noticing that when I sent you the graphics. Now I know who didn't look at the thing before we started the show. I'm going to blame you guys.
Not that closely. Like I looked at it, but not that closely.
It's your fault that I spelled something wrong. Totally your fault that I spelled something wrong. But seriously, that September 20th game against Michigan State's going to tell us a lot.
Agreed.
And it's going to tell us a lot because I think Michigan State's going to be a physical football team.
Yep.
And the other thing too, Trev, you and I have talked about this. Michigan State could have a really sneaky good pass game this year.
Yeah.
Aiden Childs comes back. Nick Marsh had a really good freshman year. They had a very good portal receiver class. You and I talked about them as a sleeper team and top receiver units. Not that they were a top 10 team, but like, hey, look out for Michigan State. If you can beat them and your defense plays well against them, then that signals to me, okay, USC has turned a corner. And now you've just got to, like I said, you got to just hold water the next month and get out of that stretch 2-2. If you do that, now here's the thing. If they go 2-2 against that stretch, in my opinion, you guys tell me if you disagree, they're going up to Eugene on the 22nd of November in a, if we win this game, we can lock a playoff spot down against UCLA. Or we might be locking down a spot into the Big Ten title game if they can beat Oregon and UCLA. Because if the season goes how I'm predicting it goes prior to Oregon, one of their losses is to Notre Dame, which means they've only got one Big Ten loss, which means that Oregon USC game on November 22nd all of a sudden has Big Ten title game implications, which is doable for USC, in my opinion. Like it's going to be tough to beat Oregon at Oregon, but isn't the sign of like you're turning things around that you're going into November with a chance, even if you don't make it, you drop that Oregon game and you lose by 7-10 against Oregon, who's going to be really good this year. Isn't that kind of getting back on track? Hey, look, we were in the conversation. Now we take that next step where if you're going into the Oregon game and you're like, dude, we've already got 3 or 4 losses. We still want to get embarrassed. It's like, okay, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed because 7-8 wins this year is a huge disappointment. Huge disappointment for USC because the talent it should be better than 7 regular season wins. In my opinion, you go 8-4, that's a disappointing season. I think 9-3 is very reasonable and possible for them. And if you do that, you've got some very good wins under your belt. If you lose to, let's just say they lose to Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Oregon, that means you had to beat I think a very improved Michigan State team. You had to beat Michigan. You had to beat Illinois on the road as a top 25 team. You had to beat a good Iowa team. Guys, that's and what some people think is going to be a good UCLA team. I have my doubts, but we'll see. That's a lot of good wins for USC, and I think that helps you get back on track because they're recruiting in high school the way they are right now, coming off of a 15-11 stretch. What's going to look like if USC can go 9-3 in the regular season and win a bowl game? Now, what all of a sudden does it look like when they're trying to hit the recruiting trail in 2027? So I think it's a big year for them, guys, but I think they're capable of going 9-3. I'm a little bit more bullish on the Trojans than maybe I was a month or two ago as you just kind of look through it all and everything kind of shakes out of who's leaving, who's coming, and all that kind of stuff. You look at their schedule. I think 9-3 should be the expectation for Michigan or for USC. Whether they get there or not is a question mark, but I think that should absolutely be the expectation for USC. 9-3 or better. Because you can pull off one upset. Like, do you guys really count a win at Illinois or at North Nebraska like an upset for USC?
No.
Like, it may be in the betting line, but like, guys, it's USC.
It shouldn't be because you're USC.
Right.
But it
so
might be because
it's really
of where
just,
they're at.
can you upset Notre Dame or Oregon? You do that, you got a shot to be a playoff team as long as you don't have some terrible bad loss. So I'm a little higher on USC maybe than I would have been when the offseason started. I think this is a solid looking roster. I really do.
Yeah, I think it's a solid looking roster with a favorable looking schedule. I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that USC enters a Notre Dame game undefeated. Like, that's not an impossible feat.
And if they are, they've got some really good wins under their belt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, fact of the matter is USC was pretty good at home last season. The only 2 losses in the Coliseum last year was to Penn State, a college football playoff semifinal team by 3 points in overtime, by Notre Dame, the team that played for the national championship game.
That carries some weight. A red zone interception pick 6 away from tying.
Yeah.
In the fourth quarter. Right.
I mean, it was, and USC had a lead in the fourth quarter against Penn State. They just blew the lead.
The only team that they did not have a lead against in the fourth quarter last season was Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That's it. They didn't have a lead the entire second half. Well, actually, they never led in that game at all. but in every other game they lost, they had a lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you go and you look at some of these teams on there, like there's no, until you get to the back half of the schedule, there's no like unknowns. Like I know Illinois, like to me, you know what Illinois is. They went 10-3 last year. I think that's the ceiling of what this team is too. Like that's a good year for Illinois if they go 10-2 again. That's not going to sneak up on anybody. You know, Michigan, look, until proven otherwise, if you stop the run, you can beat Michigan.
Yeah. Even if their quarterback's better, guy, who they throwing to?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Look, yes, their quarterback's better, but to what? Like in 2017, Notre Dame's defense was going to be better than 2016. I didn't care who the defensive coordinator was. I knew they were going to get better.
It could be worse. Right.
That's what I'm saying. It's like Michigan's quarterback play is going to be better. And it's like, yeah. And that's like if in December I was sitting there, I was like, man, I bet you it's going to be hotter in July than it is today. It's like, yeah, duh. Like yes, Michigan's quarterback play will be better this year, but that's marginal. I mean, yes, I hope you're better than Davis Warren.
I think it'll be a lot better relative to that, but the question mark still is, who are you throwing to? And if you're concerned about USC as a secondary, I like USC's secondary a lot more than I like Michigan's pass catchers.
Sure do. You know, and so you know what Michigan's going to be. If you can stop the run, you can beat them at home. At Notre Dame, I don't have them losing to it. I don't have USC beating Notre Dame in South Bend. I don't. But what does work in USC's favor is, unlike the last time they came to South Bend, you know what this Notre Dame team is. You know how talented they are. You're going to have sample sizes from Miami and Texas A&M and Arkansas and Boise State.
And you'll have nothing to lose.
Exactly.
No, there's going to be zero pressure on you. Even if USC is undefeated, there's going to be zero pressure on them coming in Notre Dame unless Notre Dame has somehow a couple losses.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then the back half is where it gets a little bit more interesting. On the road against Nebraska. On paper, that should be a tough matchup. And it could be. I'm not naive to that fact. I just don't know what Nebraska is going to be this year.
Right.
Have the potential to be good, or they could be 7-6 again.
That is a matchup of two of the toughest teams to evaluate in the Big Ten going into the season.
Yes.
That Nebraska versus USC game. And this game could be one, Trev, that is, which way do they both go?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at Nebraska's schedule up to that point in time, it's a relatively manageable schedule. They've got Cincinnati, Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan at home, Michigan State at home, at Maryland, at Minnesota, home against Northwestern before they go to USC, or they host USC.
It's like IU schedule.
They're at USC, excuse me. But, like, could you imagine that could be a top 25 game?
Yeah.
Like it could be. And then the question is, like you said, USC, then the three of the last four challenging games. And then you look at Nebraska after USC, they got to play at UCLA, at Penn State, home against Iowa. So, like, that game is going to determine a lot for both of those teams, who I think we both would say they've got a chance to be a lot better, but they've got to show it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very intriguing matchup. Very intriguing matchup.
No, it really is. And I mean, even Oregon on the road, I don't know what Oregon's going to do this year, especially now after they lost Evan Stewart. Got to replace a lot up front. You know, I have faith in Dante Moore. They have very young athletic receivers, but it's a question of how that's going to translate over to this level. I mean, I the same questions I have about Texas's receiving core, I have about Oregon's. Very young, unproven talent, but it's very talented. So on one hand, I can't say Oregon will be fine, but then have it be a question mark for Texas. And so, or even on the road against Oregon, it's not a given that they're just going to decimate USC. Do I have Oregon winning? I do. But do I think it's going to be super lopsided? I don't. And so this schedule is really, really favorable.
There's also a lot of veterans on this team who will have played at Oregon before.
Yep.
So, I mean, they played at Oregon in 2023. Now, there's not a ton of guys on the roster left from that game, but there's plenty. So, yeah, it's a schedule that's not easy, but also one that is manageable. If you're truly turned around, if USC's back on track, that's a 9-win schedule.
I'd say at least.
Yeah. Because if you look at USC last year, guys, I mean, they went 7-6. We talked about this. They went 7-6. One of their losses was to the national runners-up. Another one of their losses was to a Final Four team who got beat in the playoff by 3 by the national runners-up. They beat LSU. They lost to Michigan on the road by 3 on a last-second touchdown. They lost at Minnesota by a touchdown in the game they led in the fourth quarter. They lost to Maryland by a point on the road in a game they led in the fourth quarter. They lost at Washington, who was a very good home team last year, by 5 in a game they led in the fourth quarter. And then their last loss was to Notre Dame. Again, they never led, but they were only down by more than 14 points because of a last-minute pick six where it was desperation move. I mean, it was a game where USC battled Notre Dame. And even after that, they went back down and scored. Like, they didn't quit. So this isn't a team that you're like, oh, how are you going to overcome that 56-0 loss that you had to, Indiana? Like, Nebraska has to show that they can overcome. That's the difference. Is like Nebraska had some bad losses last year. USC's bad losses were, how did you lose to that team by a point? How did you lose to that team by 3? It wasn't, how did that team beat you 56-7?
Exactly.
It wasn't like that. And that's why I think there is more optimism for me that they're going to be able to, it's a couple plays here and there to turn some of those games around. I do think this year's schedule's more challenging than last year's schedule was. However, I will say that I think this is a tougher schedule for USC than last year's schedule. Because your toughest game last year was what? Home games against Notre Dame and Penn State. This year you're playing two comparable teams. Now you got to play at Notre Dame and at Oregon. Plus you have to play at Illinois, at Nebraska. Like, those are going to be tougher games. But did they get any Big Ten road wins last year? I mean, did they win any games last year on the road? At Michigan loss, at Minnesota loss, at Maryland loss. Their only Big Ten road win so far is at UCLA.
Bang.
Don't worry, they'll pick up one in their first road game this
They have
year.
yet to beat a traditional Big Ten team on the road. We joke about that, but I think that can be a mental block, guys. And you may laugh like it's only Purdue, but it's still the thought of we went on the road, out of our comfort zone, to a Big Ten team and beat them. May not seem like much, but this is a team that lost to Maryland on the road last year. I do think that notion of getting that win, we may all laugh and say it's Purdue, but to these players, it's like, dude, we can win in this league. We can go on the road and win in this league. And I think that helps them if they can play well, because what could hurt you is you get beat or you play terrible.
Well, I mean,
if you go into Purdue and do what you should do, guys, I mean, that's should be a double-digit win.
Well, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue. We talk all the time about how teams emulate who their head coach is. And when your head coach and the administration in your program spend all offseason whining about how hard it is to go on the road and win in your league, what do you expect a bunch of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to think? I mean, that's just facts of the matter. And so that's going to have to change up top. But, yeah, a win against Purdue could jumpstart that for sure.
So that's great stuff, guys. This has been a great discussion about USC. I'm very curious to see what this team can be. What I want to do before we get out of here, fellas, I gave my record prediction. I have USC at 9-3. I have them 9-2. I have them losing to Notre Dame, and I have them losing to either Illinois or Nebraska. I think they lose one of those two games. And then I have them going into Oregon on November 22nd and catching another loss. And then ending it with a UCLA win. They'll have some good wins in the season. I have them at 9-3 and making a pretty good bowl game, because I think 9-3 against that schedule has USC absolutely in the top 25. I do. So probably top 20. 9-3 with that schedule is you're probably 18th, 17th, 18th.
Well, and they get the extra prop up of being in the Big Ten and all that fun stuff too.
Right.
So
right. So I have them 9-3 playing in a pretty good bowl game. Trev, what's your record prediction for USC?
As much as I hate to say this, I have them going 10-2, and with their losses being Notre Dame and Oregon. And
you have them winning both Illinois and Nebraska on the road. That's huge.
I do, because I think like Illinois on the road. Like I said before, we've seen what this team is. Like, we know what Illinois is, and I think they're just going to be that again. And I don't mean that as a knock. They went 10-3.
Right.
It's just
had a heck of a season last year.
But they just kind of are who they are. Yeah. And then I am on more of the lesser side of Nebraska. I think they're going to be better this year, but what's better, 8-5, not 7-6, you know? So that's kind of where I have them, maybe. So, but I have them losing to USC, or I have them losing to Notre Dame and Oregon, and I don't think they're going to be able to pick up a big enough marquee win to get them into the playoff discussion. But I think they're going to be ranked in the top 25 when they come to South Bend.
Vince, I think if USC's 10-2, as long as their two losses are competitive, I think they're a playoff team.
I agree.
I think
I agree because they'll be the fourth place Big Ten team if that's the case.
I think Illinois will be ranked. I think you'll beat a ranked Nebraska team, my opinion. And I think one of Iowa or Michigan State will end the season ranked as well. And just 2 losses. There's a lot of like the SEC. They're going to beat each other up. Sure. I think it's going to be. I think they're in the conversation at least. And I think Trev, you would agree with that. They're at least they're going to be in it like Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss were at the end of the year. You would at least say that at 10-2. Whether they make it or don't, you think they're not going to get dismissed like no one's going to talk about them. I think they're in the conversation for is the committee going to put them in?
Oh, in the conversation, absolutely. Yeah. I don't see it happening because what's going to hurt them is they're not going to start the season ranked. And while I do think some of these teams will be ranked that they beat, I don't think they're going to be ranked high enough for them to be like, like USC needs to be in the playoffs definitively.
But here's the thing. They're going to have if that is the case, if they go 10-2 with the record that you have them at, they will have 1 Big Ten loss.
Yeah. They'll probably be playing for the big. That's a good point because it's impossible for more than 2 teams it's impossible for 2 of Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan to be undefeated, right? Because they all play each other for the most part.
So how those tiebreakers work out, and because people will dismiss the Notre Dame loss because, if Notre Dame's as good as we think they're going to be, they will dismiss that loss because it was at home and all those other things.
And Notre Dame's really good, right?
That's what I'm saying. So they'll dismiss that one. They'll be like, they got 1 conference loss, and So I think they're in at 10-2 personally, unless it's 10-3 and they lose in the Big Ten championship. What does that look like?
Get killed by Penn State or Ohio State.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. But I think 10-2, they're absolutely in the conversation.
So we got to wrap this up, Vince, with your.
Well, I'm not as enthusiastic as you guys. I go 8-4. I think that stretch that you guys were talking about, Michigan State, Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, I think that's going to be a very interesting stretch. I think that they will lose to Illinois on the road. I think they lose 1 of Michigan State and Michigan. Then they lose to Notre Dame and they lose to Oregon. There's their 4 losses for me.
So you still have them with some good wins, though, Vince. You have them beating one of the 2 Michigans. You have them beating Nebraska on the road, and you have beating Iowa.
But 8-4, we're at least having a conversation about Lincoln Riley's future. And they kind of go into the offseason with some question marks and things like that.
If they can go 8-4 and win their bowl game, I think people settle down a little bit. That's especially fair. If the wins and losses are to who you've talked about. I think a key to their playoff resume, if they're at 10-2, is how good is Michigan. Right. I think that's a big part of it. Yep. Is Michigan 9-3?
To be honest with you, I said they lose 1 of Michigan State at home. I think it might be Michigan State.
Because you're overlooking Michigan State. You're coming off a bye week. You're fired up to play Michigan. You want payback for last year.
And you're coming off a big win on the road against Purdue. And while we're all like, well, it's 1-11 Purdue, coming in.
But they need that win.
They need that win.
Exactly.
Right. And so now they're coming in confident against Michigan. It's just Michigan State. And I think Michigan State could get them.
Yeah.
So
I can see that.
Yeah.
I could see
that's where I'm at. But that's going to do it. That's going to do it, guys, for our USC prediction show. Check them out. They play Notre Dame week 7, of course. But check them out all year. They're a Big Ten team. So we get to watch them all the time. It's not Pac-12 After Dark for USC anymore. We get to watch them on the Big Ten Network and all that kind of fun stuff. So check out USC, and we'll see who's right. We have 3 completely different predictions here. 8-4, 9-3, 10-2.
We all think USC will be improved. That's I think the only conversation is
that's true.
Part of it's how improved,
right?
But then I think also part of it is we see some other teams as making improvements as well,
right?
Which is going to be part of the challenge that USC will have as well. We think Nebraska's going to be improved. We think Michigan State's going to be improved. We think Michigan, Iowa are going to be improved, which is what I think. Even though there's 2 elite teams on their schedule, but there's a lot of really good teams after that. So I actually think 8-4 or better is they took a step.
Point in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction, exactly.
But is it a big enough step? That's the question. Yeah. Is it a big enough step for USC people?
If they keep the majority of their current recruiting class together and win their bowl game, I think it is.
Yeah.
As long as they don't get embarrassed in the 2 losses to Notre Dame and Oregon, which guys they didn't last year.
No, they didn't. I agree.
Say whatever you want about Lincoln Riley and the job he's done, but mean, they didn't have any blowout losses last year. The year before, they lost to UCLA by 18. That was a bad loss, but they battled both Washington and Oregon. They lost by 10 to Washington, but if you watch that game, that was a competitive game. They lost to Utah by 2. They lost by 9 to Oregon. They battled in that game. The only 2 really bad losses that he's had, like just, God, it was ugly, was the Utah Pac-12 title game in 2022 and then Notre Dame in 2023. Like, you could argue at UCLA in 2023 wasn't good either. But like, all those losses, they've been competitive in a lot of those games. You just got to figure out a way to stop being competitive in losses and start being competitive in wins.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So that's going to do it for, like I said, our USC prediction show, preview show. Make sure you check out Irish Breakdown, the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on CFB Nation show, the YouTube show, as well as the podcast channel and all that fun stuff. So make sure you check all that out. We'd really appreciate that. And if you want all the intel on Notre Dame, make sure you check out the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So for Trevor and Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Have a wonderful night.